guías de auditoría APG. Recordemos, como les comentábamos ayer, que ya se hizo la revisión histórica. Son documentos que se hacen en conjunto entre los expertos del 176 que produce la norma ISO 9001 y los expertos de IAF, que pues son estos expertos, sobre todo que vienen de organismos de evaluación de la conformidad. Y también, como nos explicó Charles el día de ayer, estas guías, aunque son elaboradas para la 2001, muchos otros comités de sistemas de gestión de otro tipo las están también adoptando y están poniendo en cuenta. Entonces, eh, estas guías de auditoría que estamos realizando son muy importantes. Recientemente actualizaron, hace unos meses, y somos de las primeras instituciones que están teniendo un emprendimiento formal en el tema, por parte, en este caso, de expertos internacionales, son los que las están realizando. Entonces, bienvenidos a este segundo día de actividades. Y que me puedan escuchar mejor. Les recuerdo que vamos a tener un break a la 1 de la tarde y que en cualquier momento pueden hacer preguntas o comentarios. Si no se animan a hacerlo en inglés, con todo gusto les podemos ayudar a traducirlo. Y de igual forma, a las personas que nos siguen a través de YouTube, del canal de YouTube del Instituto de Ciencias Nucleares, pues les pediría que también a través del chat de YouTube nos hagan sus preguntas, nosotros las traducimos y se las hacemos llegar al chat. Just thank you very much for being with us again. It is a real pleasure to receive you in the university. Thank you for providing this training for our internal auditors. Welcome, and the floor is yours.
Okay, I begin. Good morning, everyone. Please excuse me speaking in British English. I'm going to start with the paper about risk. I know it causes a lot of problems, but let me start with, I have two questions up now. What is the difference between continuous and continual improvement? Does anyone know the difference?
Between
Continuous and continual improvement.
well, continuous is something that is going on, no?
Okay.
Continual improvement is well, I understand as a process. My background is in processes. As a process that I have to implement in order to in order to improve the whole system, that continues, that is not static, no, that I was able to capture the feedback of clients, the partners, my own staff, and so on, in order to incorporate this idea of this feedback into my management system and continue improvement.
Thank you, Monica. Very close. My reason for asking this question is the debate between these two words, it's 3 words of the result. And is related to this, I'll come to that in a minute. But basically, one version is continuous improvement is you're doing it all the time, and continual is you're doing it stepwise. So that's why when we look at the standard, it says continuous improvement. Continuous improvement? I forget what the standard said, I'm sorry. But one is a step function, so that when an auditor comes and visits you, you do not necessarily have to demonstrate improvement. But over a sequence of audits, you must demonstrate that improvement has taken place. You know, if you are a manufacturer making the same product for 50 years, are you really going to improve it every 6 months? That is difficult. So that is the basis of this debate. The difficulty is when you read management theory, it says that companies must improve all the time. So they must be doing it continuously. But then we've introduced, because of auditing, this limitation that it should be a step function. Now, why did I ask that question first and not ask the question, why does the Annex SL framework not include a clause on preventive action? Because all the previous editions of the standards, 9001, 14001, before Annex SL, always had a clause on preventive action. Does anyone know the reason why we don't have a clause on preventive action? Well, the whole system is preventive. Well, that's a good theory. The real answer is no one could audit it. Okay? But it's more fundamental than that. People don't understand the difference between corrective action and preventive action. So when something goes wrong and you have a non-conformity, the first thing you do is you try and stop it. So you do some sort of correction, maybe. Then you look at the cause of the problem and you try and correct that. And then you try and promulgate, or you try and take the reason for the cause and you investigate if it could happen anywhere else, and you try and prevent it happening elsewhere. It's this last part that people think is preventive action. It isn't. It's still part of corrective action. And people just do not understand it. So what we found with the previous editions of the standards, when we were talking about preventive action and saying, are you doing trends analysis? Are you looking at your non-conformity patterns? People would say, of course we are. We're doing preventive action. But really what they meant was they were doing the last step of corrective action. So when we came to writing this Annex SL framework, we had a big argument between the Committee for Quality that was using a process approach and the Committee for Environmental Management that was using the Deming cycle, the plan, do, check, act approach. And we had to find a way to make the two work together. And risk and preventive action were the key issues that helped us resolve how to make these two systems work together. So when we started with the new framework and people were saying, how do I use these new clauses about content, about leadership, about risk and opportunities? I always used to use this diagram. So I would say that on the left-hand side, the top management, they would understand the context of the organization. They had a vision for where it wanted to go. And they would determine the issue and they would determine the interested parties. And then through some sort of leadership activity, they would do some form of analysis and prioritization of which of those issues and which stakeholders they wanted to give maximum focus to. And then you would get to clause 6.1 and you would look at risk management issues coming out of those prioritizations. Or you would look at compliance management, regulatory requirements. Are you meeting the regulatory requirements? And from that, you would then define your operational control. You would design your system. You would, in fact, where it says 8, it could possibly say 4.3, put your processes together, and then put your operations in place. And then, of course, you have measurement, audit, review, and improvement at the end of it. To me, that was fine. But then, as with some of our discussion yesterday, I started asking myself, what are the risks in not understanding the context correctly? Because if you go back to that diagram, understanding the context is what drives everything else. So what are some of the risks in context? Regulation is quite an interesting area. Some regulators now have the authority to impose fines of up to 10% of an organization's global revenue. 10%. Think about Microsoft being fined for health and safety regulation. That's huge. So what are you doing in your organization to make sure that you're keeping up to date with how the legislation or the regulations are changing, and to make sure that you maintain compliance? That's one context issue. Yesterday, I talked to you a little bit about business continuity issues, and I gave the example of if there was flooding in Taiwan or Malaysia, what impact would it have on you if you are a user of computer chips or motherboards, because suddenly the supply has gone? How aware are you of where your supply chain is based around the world and how critically dependent we are on certain production facilities that might be subject to natural disasters, etc.? I've added an extra story there about water. This is quite an interesting story. I'm going to diverge a little bit. When the 9/11 tragedy happened, Goldman Sachs had an office in that building, but because of its business continuity planning, all data was duplicated within 1.5 hours or something like that. Because of key entry systems, they knew exactly who had been in the building at the time. And within 3 days, they were operational again, fully operational. Now, what happened with Currie? They weren't involved in 9/11, but do you remember there was an issue with benzene in the water? Okay, so about 10 years ago, Currie discovered there was benzene in sparkling water. Currie in the USA immediately withdrew all stock. Currie in France, which is the head office, said nothing for 3 days. The stock value of Currie went so low that Cadbury Schweppes bought the company. Effectively, the managers, because of inept communication, lost the company. It went back. So Currie is now part of Cadbury Schweppes. It no longer exists because of lack of proper communication planning as part of business continuity. Now, again, what is the context you operate in, and how critically you look at your communication processes for when things go wrong, and which stakeholders you communicate to? This is part of context, this is part of risk planning at the very high level in your organization. Societal risk. I gave the example of a paper company yesterday where in cutting the trees and producing the paper, it was putting spores into the environment, which were affecting the local environment. The company had not thought that this would happen. So it was poor manufacturing design, but also not fully understanding their process or the consequence of their process and how that might affect key stakeholders. Because they thought they were being nice to the local community by creating jobs and work, and instead they were creating a health problem for the local community. Again, how do you think about these things when you're considering your contract? One thing we didn't discuss before was reputational risk. We're dealing with quality. Poor quality equals dissatisfied customers, equals poor reputation and loss of business. As soon as you have a reputation for poor quality, that will spread amongst the supply chain. They won't want to do business with you, and customers won't want to use you. You have to defend your reputation as hard as you possibly can. I put in brackets which often repeat the statement that it costs 10 times as much to get a new customer as it does to retain an existing one. So what customer focus are you giving to retaining customers? There's also supply chain risks which can affect reputation. We're all aware of, I think it was Nike making trainers in Bangladesh or somewhere, or one of the fashion companies ordering t-shirts from Bangladesh. And then there were very poor working conditions over there. And people are saying, why should we buy t-shirts from this company when they effectively use slave labor in Bangladesh to produce them? That has damaged the reputation of the company full of it. People always want new t-shirts and cheaper. But how can your supply chain affect you reputationally? And again, will that give a poor impression to customers who will stop when using you or purchasing your services? So how much investigation do you do of your supply chain to find out where they manufacture and what services they're using? We also have requirements in 9001. You know, we want customer feedback. We want evaluation of customer satisfaction. How do we get that feedback? It's a very difficult question because do focus groups work? I mean, you randomly pick some people off the street, you put them in a room, you show them a new product, you say, do you prefer the blue one to the red one? And then you find out that half of them are colorblind, and so they choose the brown one. I don't know. Focus groups are a marketing tool. Customer satisfaction questionnaires are a feedback tool. But who fills in the questionnaire? People with 5 minutes to spare who can be bothered. How often do you get a questionnaire from a company? Nowadays, I get lots of emails, particularly airline companies, hotels. Please tell us about your experience with us. Do I waste my time filling in the boxes? No. So you have to question, what are your actual mechanisms for obtaining customer viewpoints and customer feedback? And how does that affect your risk? Because if you start believing what you're receiving from those mechanisms, will you actually be acting in the best interest of your organization? So there's quite a lot of things for you to think about there. And that, for me, is some of the high-level risk things that top management need to be thinking about. If I was doing my presentation about asset management, I would be talking at this point about what happens if there's sudden change in market conditions. What investments would you be able to cancel at 10 minutes notice? Do you have enough knowledge about your system, about your investment planning, to know what you can eliminate safely and still continue with the business? So there's also, if you're dealing with financial things at a high level, again, what are the risks you need to think about? I can't tell you about all of them, but I can start making you think about the issues you may need to consider. So that's high level. So when we look at the Annex SL framework, it says it now incorporates the process approach from the historic 9001 standard. It incorporates the plan, do, check, act, or demo cycle. In Spanish, how do you say PDCA?
Hacer, verificar, no, es planear, hacer, verificar y actuar.
Okay.
Le llamamos DN, ciclo DN.
Okay, so you all understand. Okay. And the third issue we added on to Annex SL was the risk-based approach. Now, how do you analyze process risk? There's no requirement in 9001 for a process mapping. It's useful. It doesn't really show you anything about risk, it shows you sequences of activities and decisions, etc. And when you look at a basic process, you know, it has inputs, the process, outputs, resources, measurement control, and then some sort of feedback. Very simple process model. And when we look at plan, do, check, act, we can see that it can be applied to all of the requirements of the system. So just one aside note, people are taking photos and things, don't worry, Monica will share the presentation with you. Thank you. But how do we put plan, do, check, act around the process? And this is the best that I came up with. So the plan has to be something outside of the process, because that's clause 6.1. Clause 6 is planning, but 8.1 is also looking at processes in detail. Where do you put the risks in that? It's still visually difficult to see. But there are a lot of tools available, and visually, I'm sure many of you know about PERT analysis. So they plan a series of tasks and how long they take. Well, you can impose on top of that a certain amount of variation. So this is what's called critical path analysis. Again, it's a well-established technique, but it's showing some of the risk of delays on an activity being performed. And by putting those delays into the chart, you can see what the most likely time for producing something is. But this is a well-established technique. But if you were to use a visual display like this, what other risks could you put onto this map? So could you put boxes on this, for example, about competency risk? Yeah. Could you identify which is the highest risk activity, and maybe use some sort of coloring system? Put the highest risk in red or the lowest risk in green. So you have a very simple visualization of the risk in processes that you have to look at. Now, I'm not allowed to impose these tools on you, and you as auditors are not allowed to impose these tools on your client. But actually just showing them examples of ways by which they might be able to make risk more visible to themselves and to their workers, because they're the people who operate the processes, you might be able to analyze the risk in the process much more clearly. Okay? But actually, within the guidance, this is the guidance on processes, it's not the guidance on risk. This is what the auditing practices group says, and this is not dependent on a diagram. This is a very logical sequence of activities for an auditor. So, from the start, in the top left, you understand the activities, you understand the inputs and expected outputs, you understand the sequence and interactions of the processes, you comprehend the determined criteria, methods, monitoring, measurement, understand the resources and responsibilities, verify if actions to address risk and opportunities are being integrated and implemented. Okay? Assess how changes are implemented and controlled, assess if processes are carried out as planned and effective in achieving the intended result. Okay? It's a very logical auditing sequence. Does it tell you how to audit the risk well? So, what are the risks you're going to be looking at? If I go back to the sequence, if you take any particular process, what are the risks of the input? In fact, I'll go back even further. So, what are the risks to the input? What are the risks on the control? What are the risks on resources? And resources, as I've just mentioned, can include competency, human resources. In the old days, we used to have 9001 required something like 64 sets of documented procedures. And in the Annex SL framework, we don't talk about procedures at all. Why is that? Well, a procedure, in our view, is a risk control mechanism. It's understanding that someone does not know how to operate the process, so they need to be given written instructions or visual instructions or a video or some communicated method of how to operate the process. So the reason we don't require procedures in Annex SL is it's down to you, the organization, to decide where you need these kind of risk control. But the auditor should be evaluating, are those controls sufficient? So the auditor will look at the process and say, you have a lot of students doing this activity, but you seem to have nothing controlling what they do. How are you going to manage that? Something is missing between what they're doing, what the process should be doing, and the controls on it. So that means the auditor actually has to go down to the process level to examine the process for all of these different aspects. Okay? And when you've got a complex process map, and that is a very simple process map, this can take an awful lot of time. Monica, you can take the question.
Pedro's would like to explain a little bit of the time.
You take the mark.
Yes, sorry, I was saying that if you don't mind, I'd like to explain it a little bit in Spanish, just to see if they got this concept clearly, because it's interesting. Bueno, a ver, ya se está yendo a dos vías. Por un lado, está hablando principalmente de la guía de riesgos, pero está utilizando también la guía de procesos. Porque sin tener claro cuál es el proceso, el auditor no puede identificar si hay faltantes en los riesgos. Es básicamente lo que está diciendo, ¿sí? Entonces, en el primer diagrama que él pone de proceso, está muy claro el proceso, entradas y salidas, y ponen el ciclo PDA, que es lo que ustedes tienen que identificar. Y luego se refiere a la identificación de los procesos y está hablando de que las organizaciones pueden identificar los procesos de muchas formas. Esta que pone aquí en pantalla es un diagrama muy utilizado de identificación de procesos, donde dice que la parte de las organizaciones pueden identificar los riesgos más importantes en sus operaciones a través de este tipo de diagramas. Y que lo pueden identificar desde sea con un color rojo o algo así, ¿no? Pueden poner un box también al lado, en fin, hay muchas formas. Él decía, ese es un tema muy importante, que uno como auditor no puede imponerle la forma en que lo van a identificar, ¿sí? Pero, pues uno debe de poder como auditor entender qué herramienta están usando. Y luego mostró un diagrama, y es cuando hizo referencia a la guía de procesos, donde está muy claro qué actividades debe seguir un auditor para evaluar un proceso, ¿sí? Entonces, que fue este diagrama de cuadros que nos mostró hace rato. Y ahí viene la actividad de identificar precisamente los riesgos, o sea, entonces, lo que yo quería comentarles es que esto que él está comentando, ustedes lo tienen que hacer o lo hacen primeramente bajo el esquema y los procesos de la coordinación, lo hacen cuando están haciendo la revisión de la planificación, perdón, cuando están haciendo la etapa de planificación, cuando están haciendo la revisión de la documentación en la parte documental. Entonces, en el formato 23, ahí les va diciendo qué van ustedes, qué procesos o documentación van revisando, y ustedes van determinando qué es lo que está bien, o donde hay un posible hallazgo, o donde tienen dudas. Y ahí es donde se debe documentar como auditor, donde documentamos nosotros estas omisiones que decía, donde nosotros podemos decir, oye, a ver, de lo que yo estoy identificando de este proceso que estoy revisando, no están identificando este riesgo, hace falta esto, ¿no? Que es en la etapa en la que él está. Entonces, eso es lo que él ha estado explicando y ha estado yendo de una guía hacia otra, y es un tema muy importante que él está abordando porque genera muchos problemas durante la auditoría. En la parte de planificación y también en la parte de ejecución de auditoría, ¿no? Ahorita estamos, nada más está él hablando hasta este momento de la parte de planificación, donde ustedes están identificando esto a nivel documental y luego hay que verificarlo en la auditoría en sí. Y bueno, también comentó una cosa muy importante sobre los procesos. Entonces, dijo que la norma no pide ya procedimientos documentados como lo hacía antes, porque los procedimientos documentados en esta versión se ven como una herramienta de riesgo, ¿sí? O sea, yo documento procedimientos porque al escribirlos, pues estoy mitigando el riesgo de que la gente no está entendiendo el proceso. Entonces, al tenerlo por escrito o en un diagrama visual o de alguna forma, las organizaciones mitigan ese riesgo. Pero también la organización es la que tiene que decidir hasta dónde va a mitigar este riesgo, en función también de la educación de las personas, del tiempo que tienen desarrollando la actividad, etcétera. Entonces, a lo mejor yo no necesito un procedimiento de 50 hojas, sino una ayuda nada más visual, ¿no? Esto hacen muchas organizaciones, pero depende de las personas que están ejecutando esos procesos. Entonces, hasta ahí vamos. ¿Hasta aquí dudas? Okay. So, there are some questions. I just explained it in Spanish, and there are some questions. Raúl. No se comunique por rebocas porque no se pero ¿cómo se aplicaría acá? Ah, ok, bueno, a ver, aquí cuidado. Depende de la norma. She's just asking about, in our context, we have integrated systems with 17.25. So in 17.25, there are some procedures, documented procedures that are still mandatory. So
That's because it's an out-of-date condition.
yes, but we have a very big discussion like yesterday about, 9,000, I'm going to say it in Spanish. Ayer tuvimos una discusión a la hora de la comida muy interesante sobre el enfoque que tiene la 9001 contra el enfoque de los 60 de la 17025, que define una política para todo y procedimientos para todo, y bueno, choca con esto, ¿no? Mira aquí, el problema es que aunque no estemos de acuerdo con el 17025, pues lo pide de aquí, ¿no? Entonces, cuando la 17025 pide un procedimiento documentado, pues como hay que tener un procedimiento documentado. Hay muchas normas de caso que piden procedimientos documentados. Y bueno, pues ni modo, eso es mandatorio y se tiene que tener. Cuando estamos hablando de sistemas integrados y el laboratorio está diciendo que va a cumplir, en el caso de la UNAM, con la 9001 y no hay un mandato de procedimiento, pues sí, tú puedes, o sea, la organización, o en este caso el laboratorio, no está forzado en tener el procedimiento documentado. Ahora, nosotros como una buena práctica en la universidad, hemos manejado el que siga habiendo procedimientos en los sistemas de gestión. ¿Por qué? Porque eso es más fácil para los laboratorios. Nosotros somos una organización que está acostumbrada a que la gente haga, documente sus actividades. Eso lo hacemos constantemente, no tenemos problemas como por eso. Pero hay organizaciones que son diferentes. Yo trabajé en un banco y todos los procedimientos, por ejemplo, eran diagramas, ¿no? Que arriba tenemos más o menos eran diagramas, ¿no? Y en la parte de TI se da mucho el tener procedimientos como diagramas, eso mientras necesita la gente, está bien. O sea, tú como auditor no puedes decir que necesita una descripción de 50 páginas, ¿no? En la industria de la manufactura se da también mucho que a los obreros les ponen también diagramas, ¿no? Y además de eso, a ellos les ponen más de ayudas visuales, donde les ponen fotografías, ejemplos de la operación o pequeños diagramitas, ¿no? Entonces, la documentación en sistemas integrados, primero, o sea, lo que tengo que verificar es si ese procedimiento es mandatorio. Si es mandatorio, pues no, lo tienen que tener, ¿no? Y en segundo lugar, si no es mandatorio, pues o sea, a nivel auditor, pues yo lo que tengo que verificar nada más esté disponible, me entiendan, etcétera. Pero eso ya es a nivel, digamos, documento, no es a nivel de... Sí, era la pregunta, sí estoy contestando la pregunta. Sí, eso está relacionado con lo que vimos ayer. Una de las primeras cosas que ustedes tienen que revisar como auditores es el alcance, ¿no? O sea, el alcance del sistema de gestión contra el alcance de la auditoría, ¿no? Y había un tercero, bueno, cuatro, el alcance de la norma, el alcance del sistema de gestión, el alcance de la auditoría, y no me acuerdo ¿perdón? Del sistema, gracias. Entonces, eso es lo que ustedes tienen que verificar. Ayer platicábamos que a veces, en la mayor parte de los casos en la UNAM, construimos un sistema para el instituto, para la facultad. El sistema está pensado así, pero es un sistema que va a ir creciendo. Entonces, en un primer alcance, a lo mejor va a faltar un laboratorio, como es el caso, por ejemplo, de materiales ahorita, ¿no? Que se construye un sistema para todo el instituto, pero ahorita nada más está entrando un laboratorio. Pero ellos ya, mientras están en el proceso de certificar este laboratorio, ya están documentando para el siguiente, y así se va expandiendo y expandiendo y expandiendo el sistema. Entonces, ustedes como auditores lo que tienen que ver es, a ver, ¿cuál es el alcance del sistema y cuál es el alcance de esta auditoría? Porque eso va a definir de dónde a dónde van los procesos, o sea, qué tan grandes son. Entonces, y hacia dónde tienen que revisar o no, y hasta dónde va a estar la documentación con ese alcance. Pero recuerden que no siempre estamos hablando de documentación, o sea, es alcance de los procesos no necesariamente debe estar asociado a de dónde empieza y dónde termina el procedimiento, porque esta norma en particular habla de información documentada y no necesariamente va a estar alineado, aunque nosotros como buena práctica les estamos diciendo que alineen los procesos a sus procedimientos. Hay procesos que son muy grandes y se pueden estar dividiendo en varios procedimientos, ¿no? O puede haber variabilidad, puede haber procedimientos que abarquen varios procesos también, como es, por ejemplo, como los documentan en 17025, que ponen procesos de satisfacción del cliente, de quejas y de otras cosas ahí dentro del mismo documento, ¿no? Entonces, es un procedimiento, si ustedes se fijan, para gestión de quejas, a veces traen incluso la gestión de contratos y de satisfacción del cliente y otras cosas. Y ahí son varios procesos los que están concluyendo en ese procedimiento. Y en el caso, por ejemplo, de la coordinación, todo el proceso de auditorías está dividido en dos procedimientos. El de la inclusión de la auditoría, etapa 1, etapa 2, per se, planificación y ejecución, y la parte de calificación de auditores está en otro procedimiento. Entonces, yo cuando estoy diseñando mi sistema de gestión y lo estoy implementando, yo voy tomando esas decisiones. Y lo que es importante es que ustedes como auditores puedan identificarlo. Pues por eso es importante el diagrama del mono de proceso, de entradas, salidas, el proceso en sí, y que lo estemos identificando. Algunas organizaciones, y yo lo he visto aquí, como buena práctica también por proceso, identifican los documentos asociados. Eso es una cosa, por ejemplo, que hace la coordinación. Si ustedes revisan nuestro manual, que todos tienen acceso a eso, en el requisito 4.4, donde habla de sistema de gestión, nosotros los procesos estamos diciendo qué procedimientos asociados hay a cada uno de los procesos o por documentos, porque pueden ser instrucciones de trabajo también. Entonces, eso facilita mucho la auditoría, pero no todos lo hacen. Entonces, cuando no todos lo hacen, yo como auditor tengo que irlo haciendo. Y ahí es donde entra el formato 23, donde ustedes tienen que ir identificando toda esa parte de procesos nada más. Porque en función de que yo vaya identificando los procesos y vaya entendiendo las entradas, salidas y cómo van estas actividades, pues entonces voy también a entender cuáles son los riesgos asociados a esas actividades y a poder identificar si está faltando algo o pues está bien, como ¿no? Entonces, hasta este punto vamos. So, Richard, I was answering the question.
Okay. I hope you got a good answer. I didn't understand it. Okay. So,
Any other question?
so this is a graphical representation, and for me, it's very simple and very nice and easy. Can I write on the board? Okay. No, I have a two. Yeah, they don't have something to love it. But when you get into large organizations with hundreds of processes, what you tend to find is they end up using a table. Excuse my bad writing, not a straight line, if I don't think of it. So you would go here to process, and you would put number 1, number 2, etc. And maybe I'm going to go along. In the first box, you would put the interaction. So does process number 1 interact with process number 3, for example? Because that's helping the process mapping idea. Then you can start putting the risk. So when I was looking at the very simple inputs, what might be input risk? Think about if you have a continuous process, like some sort of food manufacturing or refining process. If the input supply fails, the process could explode. Right? So you could have something like on the input, material failure. I'm not going to write it out, but what other input problem could you have? You could have supplier disruption. So you put a second one, sorry, at this point, I would still be on ground. So you can list a load of items for input. You can list control. Well, I'll come to control it, but you could list resources, and you can break down resources into subcategories of materials, people, equipment, etc. And again, think about, what risk here and here on these different categories. And then, so you've got manager, I put on this diagram management, but what are the management risks? Failure of people to know what they're doing, failure of oversight. Again, you can put subcategories here, and then you can put the risks relating to those subcategories. Now, Monica mentioned you do integrated systems. So what about health and safety or environment? You can start listing the risk for environment or health and safety. This is where it gets interesting and where I've run out of space. You then have to have a column where you do the risk analysis and you say, what is the level of my risk? Low to high. Okay, and you're going to indicate maybe on a scale of 1 to 5. The next box is where you start putting in your risk control. And I talked about using, for example, procedures, where you have people, problems with people. So I might put procedures here. And then we put resulting risk. Excuse me, resulting risk. So we've gone from maybe you would have had a 4 here, that because of procedures that you've put in, you've reduced the resulting risk to 2, something like that. Okay? does that explain how a simple tabular system can help you build up a picture of your? I mean, that, the chart or the PERT chart was one system. This is a different system. You're more likely to find a tabular format in large organizations with hundreds of processes. Now, 9001 does not say you have to do a formal risk management approach. ISO 31000 talks about risk management. It talks about risk frameworks, risk appetites, etc. So what are we as ISO 9001 auditors looking for? Well, we're looking for some demonstration that the organization has done a risk analysis, whether it's a very simplistic one or a very sophisticated one. When we get to the resultant risk, we would perhaps expect sort of color chart or red stars to indicate the very high risk, because there are some risks you just cannot reduce. We know that. With certain processes, you're dealing with dangerous chemicals, the process itself is dangerous, you cannot reduce the risk, so you end up with a 5 level at this point. So you put a star around it, the same shape. And what we as the auditors for 9001 need to be looking at is, well, has an organization done something like this to begin with? But then, when we start seeing the 5s versus the 2s, we want to know what attention the organization is giving to those 5-star rated. And have they adequately resourced the risk control? So this becomes an analysis not just of risk, but it becomes an analysis of the resources arrow going into the process. So this is quite fundamental for doing process analysis and for auditing whether the company is being effective in managing the processes, the risk, and its resources surrounding that process. Well, it's a tool that you can use. And I hope that's something not to you. Okay? Okay. So, I've done about enough on risk, I think. There's a risk where we start boring. So what about opportunities? Wow. Opportunities are a very difficult area. Monica said you're dealing with integrated systems, health and safety. What is a health and safety opportunity? This is one of the first questions we got when we were writing the ISO 45001 standard. What is the health and safety opportunity? Is it that there are no dead people or no hurt people? Actually, it can be related in a way with environmental management. You move from using high-risk materials and high-risk processes to lower-risk materials and lower-risk processes. That's where, with health and safety, you reduce your hazard rating. So always with health and safety, the opportunity is to achieve a lower hazard rating. But with 9001, because the focus is on products and services, we've had some arguments, quite intense arguments, with some very senior managers from very large global companies who say, actually, the opportunity of a new product range or mergers and acquisitions is not a process issue. That is a senior top management level decision-making activity. And therefore, really it should not be in clause 6.1, where we currently do it, but it should be in 4.1, because that's where senior managers are looking at the context and the issues and saying, do we need to buy something or do we need to create a new product? So there's a very interesting debate. That debate is not finished. It's quite an interesting debate. But in process terms, opportunities are usually about improving the efficiency for quality. If I was talking health and safety, it would be other things. But isn't efficiency improvement an improvement activity rather than an opportunity? It's difficult to decide in 9001 the line between process opportunity and process improvement. But how about some things like improving customer engagement? Because that's not like a manufacturing process where you can measure the efficiency improvement quite so easily. You know, you can't examine material usage, you can't measure energy usage and say our process is working much more efficiently, we've halved the energy consumption, we've halved the material usage. So what about improving customer engagement? How do we go about that? What are the sort of opportunities you look for there? I mentioned a few moments ago, you know, it costs 10 times more to get a new customer than to retain an existing one. What emphasis do you put on talking to your customers, finding out what they want from you, and making sure that you will meet their future needs as well, so that they keep coming back to you? I mean, customers, most of us as human beings hate change. I particularly hate change. You know, the alarm goes off in the morning and I have to get out of bed. I hate it. That's a terrible thing. But most customers also don't like change because they've got used to dealing with you as a supplier. Now, you might be putting your prices up a little bit too much beyond what they feel comfortable with. But they will accept that because the cost of change is either too much or they just don't want to have to deal with that change. But they will only accept such situations if they have established that relationship with you and you have spent time and effort on the opportunity of improving your engagement with them. So again, where in 9001 does it say improve customer engagement? We talk about customer communication, customer feedback, customer satisfaction. We don't actually talk about engagement at all. And yet surely that is critical to all of those other three things. So there are opportunities in set areas to be considered for quality, not just the hard, my machine does this, it consumes this amount of material. So please think about those things. In asset management, the focus on the standard is about creating value for the organization. And one of the problems we encounter is where organizations have made a huge investment. You can think of creating a new power station or a new manufacturing line. And yet we're saying to them, you can get better value if you throw away your new asset and buy the latest one that's just come out yesterday. Because the efficiency savings or the cost structure of running that new asset, even though it's marginal compared to the one you just spent millions of dollars on, in the longer term adds greater value to your organization. That kind of opportunity is very hard to deal with, because to make the investment in the original asset, a lot of people would have spent a lot of time planning, making proposals, making justifications. There's human commitment into that asset. And you find they're very reluctant to change. But let me give you an example from BSI. When I started in BSI, all standards that we sold were paper. And then very quickly, we started moving towards producing them on compact disc. We invested £1 million in some very sophisticated machines for compact disc. After 2 months, we had to stop using the machine because we moved the internet delivery of PDF documents. We had to recognize that we were not creating the value for our customers by continuing to use this very expensive equipment we had spent millions of pounds on. So at what point are you, as the top managers, going to make that kind of opportunity decision? This is not 9001 clause 8, look at the processes. This is strategic level, thinking about improvement and taking the opportunity. But again, 9001 is quite weak on giving the auditor the authority to go and question top management about such changes. Because that, again, could be something they don't want to publicize. It could be useful information for competitors. We come back to the issue of confidentiality when discussing contracts with you with top management. But, so I've given you, I think, some ideas about high-level opportunities as well as process-level opportunities. But what should the auditor be looking for when you're trying to audit either opportunities or improvement? How are ideas for opportunities received? Are the actual processes that the company uses to keep itself aware of new developments adequate? I mean, do they receive scientific journals that say the latest technology in steel casting, for example, has improved to the point where you no longer need to use machining operations after you've done casting? That is the goal with casting at the moment. Can we avoid post-casting machining operations? But you're not going to find that information out unless you or someone in your organization is constantly monitoring the scientific facts to find out what's happening. You're generally academic, you're dealing with academics. I'm sure you know this world far better than I do. But so how are the ideas for opportunities and improvement received? Do you have staff suggestion schemes, for example? Are they effective? BSI introduced a wonderful staff suggestion scheme. They said, we will pay £100 for every suggestion that's accepted. And lots of my colleagues are going, money, yes, okay. I have 1,000 suggestions for you. But then they advised that the people who sat on the board to review and accept the suggestions would receive £200 for every suggestion accepted. And everyone went, no, I'm not letting them get £200 if I'm only getting £100. So you have to think about how the actual mechanism within the suggestion scheme or the receiving process for the opportunities work. Does the system that's put in place actually create barriers to receiving new ideas? Okay, so the other steps are fairly logical. You've received an idea, someone has to do, or a group has to do some kind of evaluation on whether it's an acceptable idea. If it's accepted, it has to be approved, but that requires a certain level of managerial authority because the budget to change it or to implement this opportunity might require high level of signature. Then it has to be acted on. And then really as auditors, we also need to be seeing, does the organization reevaluate the effectiveness of implementing that opportunity? Because that's how, in quality terms, we're helping the business say, look, you had this opportunity, you did some risk analysis on it, you did some evaluation on it, and you decided it was going to work. But did it actually work? And if it didn't work, what was wrong with your evaluation data? So that's the question we need to be auditing when we start talking about opportunities and improvement with companies. Okay? Any questions? Because I think I've done enough about this management.
So, Lucy's asking if it is correct to put a no conformity because the organization determines some opportunities, but they didn't actually plan or conduct some strategies in order to address these opportunities. This will be an audit finding. That's the question.
It could be. Again, yesterday we talked about being nice and giving observations the first time and then non-conformity the second time. Yes, I would raise that definitely as an issue that either their process for receiving the idea is inadequate or their process for evaluating the idea is inadequate. As an auditor, we cannot complain if the receiving process works and the evaluation process then decides not to proceed with this opportunity. So we can see that they have actively considered the opportunity and decided not to proceed with it. We cannot judge their decision-making criteria about what is a good opportunity and what isn't. That is down to them. But we can judge whether the receiving process, the evaluation process, the approval process will work sufficiently. Okay.
So, lo que Chad comenta es que la respuesta es sí. Sí puedes poner un hallazgo de auditoría, pero que tienes que ser cauteloso si primero va a ser una observación, te diría que primero puede ser una observación y ya después, en todo caso, una no conformidad. Pero dice que como auditor tú no puedes juzgar si ellos detectaron una oportunidad y determinaron que no es valiosa para ellos, ¿no? O sea, eso no está dentro, no es para que el auditor lo juzgue, porque ellos son los que tienen que determinar si esa oportunidad les puede servir o no. Lo que sí tiene que evaluar un auditor es si su proceso para recibir la gestión de la oportunidad, que es lo que nos puso en pantalla, es adecuado. O sea, si pueden, cómo reciben ellos las oportunidades, cómo las analizan, ¿no? Y después cómo determinan si es una oportunidad que van ellos a tomar en cuenta o no. Eso sí lo tiene que evaluar un auditor, pero no, un auditor no puede decidir si ellos ya haciendo ese proceso, ellos dicen yo no voy a continuar ya con esta oportunidad porque no me está dando valor. Eso no está dentro de un auditor decidirlo, es la organización que lo tiene que determinar. Pero de entrada se dice, sí sería un hallazgo de auditoría, una observación primero y pues si ya de incidencia una conformidad posteriormente, que es lo mismo que nos platicó ayer en función de lo que preguntó ayer, ¿no? Que sería con la alta dirección si sería una no conformidad, ¿no? Pero hay que tratar las cosas con una observación. Okay, so in this case, and according to your explanation, is incorrect for an auditor asking for a table of opportunities?
I would ask top management what opportunities they have considered since the last audit. Yes. I would not necessarily ask for a table. In fact, I'm just looking at the guidance, and one of the points given in the guidance is about the extent of documented information that an auditor should be looking for. I will ask you to wait a moment. I just want to go through this paper very quickly with you, and I will come back to that point when we get to the point in the paper. Okay?
I'm going to translate. Dice que él le preguntaría a la alta dirección cuáles son las oportunidades que se presentaron desde la última auditoría. Ese tendría que ser el enfoque. No preguntaría por una tabla necesariamente, pero te está pidiendo que esperes tantito porque va a revisar la guía ahorita sobre qué dice exactamente sobre información documentada que se tiene que pedir, ¿no? Yo estoy que asegura que no pide, como la norma no pide exactamente tablas, no es posible pedir tablas, a ver qué nos dice. Really?
Okay, so this paper was written at the time that ISO 9001-2015 was published. And we had a quite negative reaction to talking about risk in 9001. So the first paragraph is defending the fact that actually 9001 has always talked about risk. We've just not necessarily used the word risk. So in the past, we used to have requirements about control of documents or control of records. Why did you have to have control of documents or control of records? Because if you didn't control them, there was a risk someone would use the wrong document or the wrong record and then act in an incorrect way. So risk was always within 9001, we just didn't say, if you don't do this, there is a risk you will act in the wrong way. The next part of this paper talks about auditing risk should be performed all the time. It's not a standalone activity, and it's throughout the audit process from when you interview top management, from when you examine processes, and as you come to your audit complete. Okay? It then gives a list of some items that potentially an auditor can look at, analysis of external and internal issues. Lucy was saying, where is the opportunity? Well, maybe if you have a document from top management about external and internal issues, they would have put as an action from there some form of opportunity. We don't know. This last paragraph is the one that I think you were asking the question about, the extent of documented information. So the auditor should note that the organization has to determine the extent of documented information needed to provide objective evidence of the application of risk-based thinking. There is no specific requirement in 9001 on how to document the results or determinations of risks and opportunities. One of the reasons for that is, remember that 9001 is applicable to very large organizations as to very small ones. And in very small ones, it might be that the managing director, the chief executive, does all of this sort of risk assessment in his head. And he won't write it down. And if you remember yesterday, I talked about how courts operate. Courts operate by taking verbal evidence. So as an auditor, you may have to just accept that for opportunities and risks, it may be the verbal evidence that a director will give you. For small businesses. For very large businesses, I would definitely expect documentation. But for small businesses, no. The director should be able to talk to you and explain what his issues are, what his risks and opportunities are. And in fact, for small businesses, the biggest risk is people. You lose a qualified person, that could be the end of your business. I remember a small business I worked with where the salesman retired and the person appointed to replace him was enough. The business went bankrupt in 6 months because the new salesman just couldn't sell anything. How do you, as the chief executive of a small business, think about that risk? Are you going to write that down? That, you know, oh my God, I've got turnover of staff. This is a critical risk for me. How do I ensure that I have the best salesman to replace the one that's leaving? I know nothing about interviewing salespeople. How does the chief executive actually deal with that problem? And in fact, that's relating again to competency, which is something we're going to look at in a bit. At what level do the senior managers in an organization have to be competent? Again, that's a risk. Okay, so that was about the documented information. And it says the needs will vary considerably on documentation, depending on the size and type of the organization and the nature of its processes. Now, this list here about how can organizations determine its risks and opportunities? Well, okay, it's talking about SWOT analysis, brainstorming, competitor analysis. I didn't really go into that when I was putting this sort of simple chart here, but perhaps when you're doing the risk analysis, you use tools like that to decide what rating you're going to give any particular risk you've identified. But also generating the chart to begin with. You know, generating what are the potential risk factors. Maybe that is a brainstorming issue, or maybe a SWOT analysis issue. There are many tools that you can use, and this just gives some explanation.
I am going to translate a little bit, just to points in it. Él comentó una cosa muy importante, donde hemos tenido muchos problemas, en general, no nada más con este punto, sino con varios de la norma, ¿no? Él puso un ejemplo sobre la pregunta que hace a Luz, de que en la primera parte la norma lo que pide es, o sea, dice que debe de haber información documentada, pero en la extensión que la organización determine que es necesaria para él. Entonces, ponía el ejemplo de una organización pequeña donde, bueno, perdón, antes explicó que esto está así en la norma porque la ISO 9001, o sea, tiene una aplicación para empresas muy grandes, pero también para empresas muy pequeñas. Entonces, él pone el ejemplo de una empresa muy pequeña, donde el análisis de riesgo lo haga el director en su cabeza. Y entonces él no documente nada, lo tenga en su cabeza, y cuando ustedes van y lo auditan, él les da evidencia hablada de lo que está haciendo, como, o sea, cuáles son los riesgos que determinan, y eso es perfectamente válido, es lo que comentó. Entonces aquí me detengo porque ahí tenemos muchos problemas nosotros con las auditorías. O sea, normalmente ustedes piden documento de todo, y la norma, o sea, no piden, o sea, los auditores no tienen por qué estar pidiendo documentos de todo. La evidencia no nada más es un documento, la evidencia puede ser una situación verbal. Entonces, eso es lo que él se está refiriendo, y lo cual yo quería ahorita, puso el ejemplo enfatizar, ¿sí? Entonces hay que tener mucho cuidado, porque como documento per se, la 9001 solamente pide tres cosas: la política, los objetivos y el alcance. Nada más. No hay otra cosa que pida un documento. Todo lo demás, o sea, la evidencia puede ser evidencia hablada. Entonces hay que tener cuidado en esa parte. Y por la otra parte, ya hablando de empresas más grandes y de esta guía en particular, y ya regresando al tema de riesgos, lo que nos dice es que la norma nos da algunas directrices de documentos, ahora es documento, donde las organizaciones pueden documentar sus oportunidades. No necesariamente va a ser una matriz de riesgos, porque las oportunidades pueden venir de minutas, del SWOT análisis, de reportes, de feedback de los clientes, etcétera. Entonces, de aquí yo voy a otra situación que tenemos mucho de auditoría, ¿sí? Una cosa es que yo esté auditando un requisito y me encuentre con algo que es un hallazgo de auditoría, pero eso no quiere decir que el hallazgo de auditoría esté en ese punto, ¿sí? Sino puede ser en uno de mejora. O sea, yo puedo estar auditando riesgos, determinar lo que preguntaba Liz, determinar exactamente lo que preguntaba Luz, decir, bueno, aquí hay una oportunidad, pero ni siquiera la han analizado, y eso no necesariamente va a estar marcado en este punto, ¿sí? Puede ser mejora, puede ser contexto, puede ser otro punto, dependiendo de hacia dónde yo tire del hilo y hacia dónde vaya ese punto, ¿no? Entonces, aquí, cuidado, porque lo que está dando la guía es exactamente una guía sobre qué tipo de documentación ahora sí las empresas grandes, como la universidad, podrían tener, pero ojo, insisto, y recuerden lo que acaba de decir él, en este punto en particular, la evidencia puede ser verbal, y alguien puede tener en su cabeza todos los riesgos de su proceso. Entonces, nada más cuidado con lo que les comento. Es que cuidado, porque en riesgos, o sea, en riesgos lo que me pide la norma es que yo determine los riesgos y determine acciones para mitigarlos. Y yo no puedo determinar si como auditor, ni como usuario, ni como implementador del sistema, usuario del sistema, si esos riesgos son adecuados hasta que no detonen. Entonces, alguien podría decir, a ver, yo para mi riesgo de este terremoto, pues determiné que una acción correctiva, o perdón, una acción de litigación es poner estas escaleras, ¿no? Y salir corriendo allá abajo, ¿no? A la zona de seguridad. Pero sí, cuando se presenta el riesgo, a lo mejor yo lo que noto es que estas entradas están demasiado pequeñas, ¿no? Para que la gente baje, y entonces, pues, me generes un problema. Pero a lo mejor no. Pues entonces no lo sé hasta que el riesgo no se detone. Y alguien sí me lo puede decir verbalmente. O sea, esto que yo te estoy diciendo, oye, yo lo que determiné es que mi acción no era, ¿cómo se llama? No era la más adecuada, ¿no? Y entonces, lo que vamos a hacer es que vamos a quitar eso que está aquí y vamos a poner una rampa más grande y demás. Y te lo pueden decir verbalmente, o sea, es que depende. Exacto. Y te lo estoy diciendo verbal. Exacto. Exacto. O sea, no necesariamente lo tengo que tener en mi papel, es lo que dice la ley. Ujú. Y si yo me sé todos mis riesgos, así de memoria, y tengo una memoria prodigiosa, que hay gente que la tiene, este, pues sí, mira, perdón, aquí hago una nota, aquí un paréntesis, a lo que tú preguntas, cuando él estaba hablando de un CEO, ¿no? De una pequeña empresa que dijera todo verbal, de inmediato me acordé yo mismo. O sea, ese tipo de que sí la hay. Entonces, nada más tengamos cuidado porque no es obligatorio en este punto que me muestre algo escrito, ¿no? Me lo pueden mostrar y puede ser todo eso y puede ser otras cosas. Porque ahí hay un gran etcétera. ¿Ok? Entonces, ¿dudas hasta aquí? ¿No? ¿Quedó claro? Ok. Perfecto. No, yo no tengo. No, cuidado, cuidado. Como criterios de auditoría, no nada más está la norma, está también la documentación de la entidad y el procedimiento de auditoría de la coordinación. Esos son los criterios de auditoría. Entonces, cuidado, si una entidad ya determinó en su sistema de gestión que va a tener un procedimiento, que va a ser una matriz, o sobre ello, ¿no? No, alguien pensaría en ustedes. O sea, a ver, so Richard, we are going to into a
It's okay.
hypothetical case of the university.
It's okay,
Eh,
I'm going to sit down.
A ver, aquí hay muchos responsables del sistema de gestión, ¿no? O sea, hay, pues varios, ¿no? Entre nosotros. Está Berenice, está Jorge, está Wendy, ¿no? ¿Ustedes después de esta charla quitarían su matriz de riesgos y su procedimiento de riesgos? No, ya es de ellos. Ya les costó, ya lo hicieron, ya les funciona, ¿no? Es que, miren, aquí depende, recuerden que la clave es lo que comentó, las empresas pequeñas, ¿no? Ahora, ¿por qué nos estamos refiriendo nosotros a eso? Porque, por ejemplo, en el caso de materiales, es una persona la que gestiona todo el laboratorio, todo el sistema de gestión. Entonces, nosotros sí tenemos ese caso en la universidad. Sí se llega a dar. Así como tenemos sistemas muy grandes como el tuyo, que sería impensable que tú no tengas matriz de riesgos, por ejemplo, en la Facultad de Ingeniería, pues a lo mejor ellos se pueden decidir que no lo tienen porque pues es una persona, ¿no? Y si esa persona tiene una memoria prodigiosa, pues a lo mejor no lo necesita. Pero si es también una persona, nada más la que gestiona todo el sistema de gestión, pues muy probablemente lo necesite porque no se va a acordar de todo. Es que ahí depende otra vez, ¿no? Pero nosotros, el punto es que como nosotros como auditores no podemos imponer nuestra visión, ¿sí? O sea, si yo voy a audito materiales, y materiales me contestan y me dicen, mira, pues mis récords son así, 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 los tienen en la memoria, perfectamente válido, ¿no? Si voy audito a la Facultad de Ingeniería y la Facultad de Ingeniería dice, vamos a ver en el ejercicio de auditoría la semana pasada del curso de auditoría para nuevos auditores, dice que va a tener un procedimiento de una matriz de riesgo o un procedimiento por una serie de acciones como lo tiene la coordinación, entonces, pues lo siento, pero entonces me lo muestras y yo sigo, te audito lo que tú dices, la información documentada que tienes, ¿no? Entonces, aquí la clave del asunto es, la norma sí pide información documentada. Lo que no dice es qué información documentada ni el medio por el cual me la tienes que presentar. Eso yo como auditor es lo que tengo que evaluar, ¿no? Pero no por eso quiere decir que no lo voy a tener, ¿no? O sea, en sistemas muy grandes, insisto, o de mediano tamaño, quiero pensar en esta Victoria, pero no la veo. Pero, por ejemplo, sí está bien. Perfecto, sí está bien. Por ejemplo, en el Instituto de Física, ¿no? En el Instituto de Física empezaron con un laboratorio. Y ya ahorita van 4, ¿no? Laboratorios de extensión, ¿no? Entonces, si tú también tienes un sistema de gestión en la universidad que va creciendo, pues es impensable que no tengas algo documentado donde vas a poner tus riesgos. Sobre todo porque entre más personas hay, pues más los tienes que dar a conocer, a difundir, pues los van a preguntar, que es otra cosa que él comentaba. O sea, el tema de riesgos tú lo tienes que evaluar en cada una de las cláusulas de la ley 1. Eso lo acaba él de mencionar y ahí está. El riesgo está en todas las cláusulas. Entonces, se lo van a preguntar al responsable del laboratorio, se lo van a preguntar al laboratorista, se lo van a preguntar al top management, al responsable del sistema de gestión. A todos les van a preguntar cómo hacen eso, desde la óptica de los procesos que están manejando, porque la norma lo pide todo, las cláusulas. Entonces, pues ahí eso es lo que tenemos nosotros que tener presentes como auditores, ¿no? Okay, so yeah, we just explain how this works in the university because we have some specific requirements for maintaining some information, documented procedures and some documented records that we have. So we were talking about how we are going to handle this according to the
Okay. Going back to Lucy's question a little bit as well, the guidance talks about how can an organization address its determined risks and opportunities. And one of the examples it gives there in this bottom bullet list was the revision of old or the setting of new objectives. So you can indirectly see that opportunities and improvements are being addressed because you're seeing changes in objective setting, you're seeing action plan for new training programs for people and for staff, new work instructions being created, or definite improvement targets and projects. So those are not direct ways of determining that the organization is doing improvement or taking opportunities, but these are indirect ways. And that's why they open this paper by saying that actually when you're auditing and you're looking at risks and opportunities, it's not a standalone activity. It's something you have to do all of the time while you're conducting the audit. The last paragraph at the bottom here is about, does the organization evaluate the effectiveness of the mentioned action? And the auditor should confirm if, and this for me is interesting, if internal audits and performance evaluation activities are taken into account the effective application of the risk-based thinking. Okay, so again, this is an indirect measure of our risks and opportunities being addressed. Now, there's one other thing about risks. You audit laboratories. laboratories are full of lovely, dangerous, nasty chemicals, particularly here, we're in the Institute of Physics. There's some very nasty things. You also have professors who love playing with things to make them explode and go bang. So, if you're doing a risk analysis on a laboratory, you are saying, well, what is the risk that that process is going to cause an explosion or major disruption? And therefore, how will that prevent the rest of the functioning of that laboratory to continue? The question then is, what do you do about that risk? And one of the things that both the health and safety people and the environmental people are very worried about is the exporting of that risk to a subcontractor or to an outsourced organization. You can think, I mean, many of us know that asbestos is horrible, and if you find asbestos in a building, you're going to bring in a specialist contractor to deal with that asbestos. Why do you bring in the specialist contractor? Because they have the protective equipment, they have the knowledge, they know how to deal with it. But for something like a dangerous process that could explode, why would you send that to a contractor if you actually know how to control it properly, but you're just not doing it properly? Because you're saying, the risk of my other processes is so high, it's cheaper for me just to send it abroad or to send it to a subcontractor. So the environmentalists and the health and safety people are very concerned that organizations with very high risk activities are just going to export them. Maybe even export them to developing countries or places where the cost of human life is lower or environmental regulations are lower. So we as auditors can't audit that, but it is part of the risk discussion. Because you might see an opportunity being presented as, we have this risk in process, let's get rid of it. You can't really challenge the organization that's doing that. You can perhaps challenge them on, well, if that process that you currently do internally is now being done some distance away, won't that affect the delivery to your other processes? So will that reduce the efficiency of your other processes? But that's about the extent of the conversation we can have in the future. But it is one that is raised in the committees developing the standard. We can't actually write into the standard, you must not export dangerous processes. Many people would like to do that. Okay? So, anything else on risk? No? We can go on. Please. No, you can have a risk manager, but risk is the responsibility of everyone. If I am here and I see that the wire is dangerous, do I just ignore it? Or is it my responsibility to go and tell someone? Okay. So risk is the responsibility of everyone, but there is no problem with having one person identified as being the risk manager. Okay. Now, we have to be very careful because ISO 9001 says we do not want you to apply a full risk management process as is given in the ISO 31000 standard. For some companies, very large companies, ISO 31000 is completely applicable and appropriate. For very small businesses, it may be too much. But again, it depends. Are you a very small business dealing with very dangerous substances? So you need a very good risk program? Or it depends on your contract, again. But yes, the idea of having a risk manager, many companies have that these days. And they will be the ones who should be driving, have the process managers completed their performance chart, their risk evaluation chart. They should be responsible for the risk process. Okay. Any other?
¿Alguna otra pregunta? ¿Hay algo que necesita que la lista? Todo perfecto. Vamos a tener ninguna discusión eterna en las reuniones de elaboración de informes seguros. Bueno, ¿eh? Ahí sí vamos a aplicar, si hubiese, vamos a aplicar la no conformidad. Okay, muy bien, bueno, perfecto. Although I just asked them if we are not going to have any problem in auditing this point again, and everybody is crystal clear.
Hey, good luck. So we have not much time before the coffee break, so I think I will just quickly cover researches.
Probably we can make the coffee break, Charles. No.
Is this a good time for the break?
Let me check yours if the coffee is ready.
Okay.
Yes, we can make the break now if you want.
Let me just. No, let's do researches very quickly.
Oh, okay. So we will.
So as I've been talking about context and risk, I've talked quite a lot about resources. The guidance talks about that auditors should verify the resources needed to implement, maintain, and improve the quality management system are adequately managed. They said the quality management system. But what about the production processes? Are they part of the quality management system, or are they manufacturing processes? So when you're evaluating resources, are you evaluating just the system resources or the product and service delivery resources? Actually, because of the rate, it's both. It is both. But my reason for highlighting this quality system resources, I do not know if you know the name Philip Crosby. He's one of the American quality gurus. And he wrote a book that says quality is free. And this is a book from the 1970s. And his argument is that if everyone did everything correctly the first time, you could save a fortune in inspection costs, in monitoring costs, in rework costs. So the concept of resources for the system, if you can improve the system's efficiency, you can reduce the amount of resources needed to be spent on the system. But that requires people to act logically and in accordance with the system, and we know that people don't. So we therefore spend a fortune putting in monitoring and measuring processes, and inspection processes, etc. But it's always worth thinking about this concept when you're designing a system. Could it be done without the inspection? Could quality be free in this situation? It's just a small thing. Again, they're saying the management of resources cannot be audited in isolation. because of, you've got so many different activities, they all require different types of resources. Are the resources sufficient, or are they inadequate? It's always a difficult question when you come to the manufacturing processes in an organization, because the production manager always wants more money spending to improve the efficiency of the processes. Just as the marketing department always want more money spending to have the latest sales campaign to improve customer awareness. So at what point does the additional resources that would be added to a particular function improve the quality of that function? And should you as an auditor be making a judgment about that? You know, we're there to make sure that the company consistently produces the products and services specified on its certificate. So are we only allowed to look at the product, service, production processes or service delivery processes and go, yes, they've got enough materials to perform that process effectively and efficiently according to their contract, which is in turn leading to customer satisfaction? Or do we say, actually, we don't think you have enough people on this process, we don't have enough supervision, and supervision is usually one of the problems. You know, you don't have enough people observing what the workers are doing, so they are making mistakes, and that is resulting in poor products with poor service delivery. So how do you improve the resource of increased supervision? Can you make that as an observation or as a non-conformity as an auditor? I don't know in your context of laboratory, how critically controlled are the staff working within a laboratory, the numbers of staff? Is that something that is determined by procedures or regulations, or what commentary can you as auditors make on this? Okay. We talked about top management yesterday, so management of resources can be evaluated by interviews with top management, and you must be very nice to them. So you mustn't ask them too many difficult questions. Okay? We had that discussion yesterday. Evidence can be obtained at different stages of the audit. I think that inputs, processes, and outputs. So that's what this is suggesting you can look at. It also says that the resource allocation can be related to management commitment. It should be examined during the management review process. It should be examined during product realization processes, including during the control of non-conforming products, corrective and preventive action, and continuing improvement. So just ideas of areas you should look at when trying to determine if resource provision is sufficient. But the final one is auditors should avoid making subjective judgment on the adequacy of the resources allocated. That's your purpose, isn't it? As an auditor, you're making a judgment. And the difference between a subjective and an objective assessment, especially when you're concerned about the number of people, the amount of supervision, can be a very fine one. So that's a difficult one. And finally, we should verify that the people, infrastructure, environment, or the processes are provided and maintained in a way that's consistent with the quality policy and objectives. That's fairly logical. Okay. I think we shall take what we got now. Okay.
Vamos a tomar un receso ahorita, son 10 para la una, nos vemos, bueno, tomamos 20 minutos y nos vemos, 10 minutos. Gracias.